welcome and namaskar to all of you here in Australia and India. This is going to be a new greeting kind of mode. Yeah, great to have you all. I know it's a tough situation. Each of us are in different kind of location, fighting different battles and juggling various things. So really appreciate you all taking time to come on board this panel. Now, before I kick it off, I recognize the traditional owners of the land where we are currently having the meeting from here in Sydney, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and the emerging. I really am keen to look at this panel to really initiate a conversation, spark off a collaborative thinking, and also discuss certain opportunities looking ahead the post-COVID situation. I know we are not quite in the clear. Both in Australia, we have a cautious relief of restrictions, but in India, I still understand that there are quite closely. We are monitoring the situation as we again come to towards normalcy. So I recognize that, and definitely anything that we will kind of undertake will be cognizant of that. So on that note, essentially, I want to look at the time ahead that we have. We have had a great development between Australia and India in terms of relationships. We've had a couple of weeks back, both the prime ministers of India and Australia were on a virtual summit, and some major agreements have been signed and towards closer collaboration at multiple sectors. And one of them is definitely in the startup innovation collaboration, and which is across various industry sectors as well. So with that really kicking off, there's an increased amount of activities and discussions happening on both sides at various sectors. And I think it's pertinent that we even start that conversation on the startup innovation sectors. And as part of the Australia-India Innovation Bridge program, we want to kick off a webinar series which connects the ecosystems at multiple levels. Now, this would include the leadership ecosystem builder level, which is where this current session is supposed to spark off. And we also have various connects at the influencer, the EIR, mentor advisory level. We'll also have connects on the startup founder level and the investor ecosystem level as well. So there's various chain of webinars being planned over the next couple of months to again initiate this collaboration between both these ecosystems. And we also have a focus on emerging tech, manufacturing, and other aspects of Make in India as well, which is really coming out as part of this whole new opportunity to collaborate between Australia and India. So that's kind of the context I want to set, and we've got leaders from both sides in Australia and India from a capacity building ecosystem leadership level. I want to quickly introduce the panelist, Shri Anil Wadhwaji, who's a former ambassador to several countries, and he's also been entrusted through the Indian government and presenting CII as well to prepare a response to India Economic Strategy Outlook paper that was done by Peter Varghese, looking at 2035 outlook and approach to increase trade and investments. And Shri Anil Wadhwaji has actually got his response ready, and he will definitely share some insights. And welcome you, Anilji, for the session. We've got from India, Ravi Narayan, who is the CEO of T-Hub, which is one of the largest innovation ecosystem and startup ecosystem out of the state of Telangana. And he's also, which I learned recently, the Chief Innovation Officer of that state as well. So welcome, Ravi, on board. And from our end, myself, Irfan Malik, CEO of InQ Innovation, and also the National Chair for Australia-India Business Council Startup and Innovation Chapter. I've also got Chantel, who's the CEO of the studio, which is at the Sydney Startup Hub, and which is it's an incubator accelerator program into media tech and new tech telecommunication sector as well. Welcome, Chantel. I've got Matt Proft, who's the director of New South Wales Startup Innovation Precinct Development, and also very active role he's played in landing pad development and curation globally, and also representing New South Wales Treasury and New South Wales Government. Dr. Ramanan is also from India. He is has joined back. He's a mission director at one of the largest gov-backed innovation development program across multi-facets across India. Being involved with 40 plus or large number of incubators across India, and also quite a lot of presence across various educational institutions and schools as well, and very important role, as part of a national organization called Niti Aayog, which is National Institute for Transforming India. And Dr. Ramanan is the mission director of Atal Innovation Mission, which has got this India-wide mandate to really, harness and nurture innovation at various levels. So welcome you all. On that note, I will kick off this panel by inviting you all to share a few minutes of, for you to share insights on, obviously the impact that you've seen during COVID, but how you look at the outlook ahead and what kind of collaboration between both the ecosystem, and also any gov policy related aspect that you want to touch on as well. So I'll start off with Anil Vadvaji. You have been crafting the response. If you can share some insights of what kind of focus it has got on startup sectors and various industry sectors, it'll be great to kick off a conversation with that. Over to you, Anil Vadvaji.
Thank you very much, Irfan, and I'll try and be very brief because we have lost some minutes already. So I'd start by saying that when we are looking at the Australia economic strategy from the Indian perspective as a response you mentioned to the Australia's version of India Economic Strategy 2035, we looked at the startup sector in particular because it's vibrant in both countries. As far as India is concerned, it's grown quite well in the past few years. And there is, of course, central government support, state government support, and there are also a number of other initiatives that have been taken. There are Indian Institutes of Technology and centers of learning, which are also paying a lot of attention to this particular sector. Going by that, and that's how I came into contact with you initially, if you remember. And we took it from there and did a number of case studies as well, which will find a mention in the report. So I'll very specifically go into and very briefly go into 4 or 5 sectors that we think would be an area of collaboration between the two countries in the future. First of all, the Indian startups could look at Australia as a test market for global expansion, because as we know, market testing is a very critical process, especially for a startup with new products and innovations. And many Indian startups are looking to expand globally with better margins and returns from international markets is the key reasons. Now, Australia, while being a multifaceted market like the US, is still comparatively small enough for our product to scale up, although less dramatically. And Australia has various startup support policies, which we observed, and also some grants to promote entrepreneurship. So Australia's similarities with the Western countries and a relatively small population size make it highly suitable for Indian startups to test their business products. Remember that one of India's premier, ride-hailing service, Ola, chose to launch itself internationally first in Australia. And as I mentioned, we have them as a case study in this report. Secondly, the Australian startups could explore the opportunity to enter the Indian market for growth opportunities because India has a large market and is expected to come back to a reasonable level of growth over the next decade or so, once we are through with the pandemic issues. And this coupled with the supportive government policies, as I mentioned, also the vibrant startup environment that has come up makes it an attractive destination for Australian entrepreneurs in this field. I feel that Australian startups can benefit more from the active investment environment. They can also scale up their businesses to address the needs of the growing market. And also, the Australian startups can set up their infrastructure in India and benefit from the technical workforce which is available in the country. Now, India is moving aggressively towards digital banking, and Australian fintech startups have the opportunity to enter this market and collaborate with Indian financial institutions. That includes banks and payment platforms, NBFCs, etc., and other financial firms to expand their operations further. A third point that I wanted to mention was about filling in the current talent gap in Australian startup ecosystem in niche areas. So to address that niche shortage of talent in Australian-based startups, Australia and India could also collaborate to fill that gap in the startup ecosystem. India has various technology and business institutes that produce a lot of skilled professionals every year. India is also home to a wide base of talent pool with technical and business skills. And every year, a large number of Indian engineering and business management personnel migrate internationally for better employment prospects. So Indian professionals are also more likely to consider moving to Australia if the visa regulations and documentation are made easier. So that's one of our recommendations there. And also, the partnership will generate, I think, employment opportunities for Indian professionals and will help Australian startups to fulfill their niche talent deficit. The report recommends the two governments can take this forward through discussions. The fourth area is joint research initiatives to boost the startup culture in both countries. And as we know, Australia's federal government has set up cooperative research centers that function as key bodies in Australia for scientific research, and these bodies support alliances between industry and researchers. In fact, the Australian cooperative research centers operate across various sectors, and that includes manufacturing, mining, infrastructure, agriculture, information and social services, environmental and medical service sectors, etc. So collaborations between the CRCs and the Indian research bodies as well as industries can be carried out, and they can collaborate on sharing industry knowledge and solutions on various common emerging sectors that includes medical technologies, agriculture technology, education technology, advanced manufacturing, etc. Also, I think there is scope for organizing joint entrepreneurship programs for startups, and that includes research parks that could increase research and development collaborations between the startups of both countries. Now, we must also remember that India and Australia have set up the Australia-India Strategic Research Fund, and that is a platform for bilateral collaboration in science. It's jointly managed and funded by both governments and involves around 100 top universities and research institutions from both countries. The key focus there has been on scientific and technology projects that entails things like marine science and energy storage, etc., or biotechnology such as plant genomics and neurodegenerative diseases. But a greater focus on such collaborations, we feel, especially with India-centric research solutions, can be facilitated across the two countries. The report also recommends that the two countries should set up actually a joint innovation and startup fund, with each country contributing $20 million each on an equal basis over a specific period of time. Because that will, I believe, give a boost to this collaboration, which is emerging very well. And the last point, that I'd like to mention here is also the opportunity for Australia to enter the Indian market for growth opportunities, because in the recent years, Indian startups have diversified with transformative technologies across a wide range of sectors such as healthcare and fintech, transportation, hospitality, and food delivery, etc. And if we look at the data I think the foreign investments into India have also grown substantially in 2018 and 2019. This year has been not so good, obviously, because of the COVID pandemic, but we hope that will pick up a little later. So the report recommends that Australian investors should explore investment opportunities in the Indian startup market as we go further. A little bit about, since you mentioned about COVID-19 impact, etc. Just 2 points I'd like to make. One is that, during this period, everybody would have expected that the startup scenario would not do so well. But we found that, there are particular areas where the startups have done well. And that includes, the e-pharmacies, for instance, the delivery companies, and also monitoring companies. So all of them have had an opportunity during this lockdown period, and have emerged actually as companies which have increased their business. The learning companies also have done extremely well. Some of them have tripled the number of hits that have been seen. Also, the last point is about funding, because we were doing very well in India with regard to funding so far. 2018 and 19 were good years, as I mentioned. In fact, there was a significant jump in funding last year, and close to 2,000 startups were set up, 50% of which received funding. Then again, 9 Indian startups joined the Unicorn Club, and 4 got publicly listed. So 2020 has started off very well. Now, of course, we have a situation where we don't know how this will go in the future. Uh, Also, because there's been a change in the investment regulations in India vis-a-vis the countries which have a border with India, and that means that the Chinese investments would obviously come under greater scrutiny, I would say. It's not as if they're stopped, but at the same time, this would make additional funding a little more difficult for the homegrown startups, because it will cause some amount of delay. Hopefully, procedures would be put in place that will not do so. But one must remember that China is one of the biggest stakeholders in the Indian startup ecosystem today, and 18 of the 30 unicorns in India are backed by Chinese investors and venture capitalists, including the likes of Tencent and Alibaba. And their investment is supposed to be about 8 billion in the Indian companies. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anilji, for sharing those insights. I think you've touched on quite a lot of broader aspect. And one of the things which I will come back later is around the funding side. And one of the things which I've been really interested in trying to drive is the fund of funds. Maybe this is a good time for participation, but I'll come back to that in a tick. Let's hear from Matt. Matt, I know you have to go very soon, but definitely keen to hear from you on from a New South Wales government perspective and this whole innovation precinct development perspective. You have got a major project coming close to the central area, city central area. So what is happening to that strategy, the momentum you had, and also, with post-COVID, I know the ecosystem has taken a hit here, especially with the co-working spaces and innovation hubs, the occupancy being severely impacted, but now we're looking to bring that back on board. What are the measures, strategy that New South Wales government and your office is undertaking? What is your outlook ahead, and what kind of support is being planned from a government perspective?
Irfan, thanks so much for providing the opportunity for me to join this webinar today. Look, I might leave the commentary on the effect of COVID on incubators to my learned colleagues, Chantel and Brad. They are living this dream/nightmare firsthand. So I think they're much better placed to reflect on that piece. But I think at a system level, we've really seen the tremendous effect that COVID-19 has had on all forms of commerce in our community. That the startup sector is just one element, but particularly the effect that this has had on retail, on hospitality, on travel, and then also a lot of a wide range of unintended consequences into allied health areas. You know, physiotherapists have stopped working because there's no referral business from people going to see their GP for more typical health matters. So there's been a tremendous and wide-ranging effect in the economy. I would observe that the effect on the startup and technology sector has been quite varied. We've seen some outstanding opportunities presented through this environment for companies in the medtech space, for companies providing virtualized solutions, for those who are enabling, I guess, the transition of traditional offline businesses into online business. The flip side of that is many startups have found this period really challenging as their customers have retreated into essential business only. And so that's been a really confronting element for many startups that, you know, relationships that they'd been curating for quite some time have gone ice cold, to put it very plainly. And so that will have a long-term effect, as will particularly there was already a trend of slowing investment in the very early stage angel and seed stage investments, but with a halt on all kinds of discretionary spend, that effect on the very early that effect of funding on very early stage businesses is ever more acute, and we've got a lot more to do in understanding those impacts and planning ahead for them. To talk about the Sydney Innovation and Technology Precinct, which is a project that I'm fortunate to lead, where government has identified an area around Sydney and Australia's largest transport hub, Central Station, which is the busiest transport hub in the Southern Hemisphere. You know, there's a unique opportunity to draw upon the rich set of innovation assets that exist in the sort of 6 square kilometre precinct that surrounds the Central Station and Everleigh rail yards, where you've got a dense education environment with 2 of Australia's leading universities in the University of Sydney and the University of Technology. You've got more than 100 R&D centres, many focused in the biotech and biomedical space, but a growing number covering the widest array of innovation and R&D. Alongside that, you have some of our key national research institutions like Data61, looking at solving the data challenge that Australia faces and looking to apply that across the world. You know, organizations like Defence Science and Technology and Cicada Innovations, who are genuinely the home for some of Australia's leading deep tech innovation. You've got amazing sort of research drivers like the Sydney Quantum Academy, which is one of the leading is emerging as one of the leading teaching institutions for quantum computing and the associated research and commercialization. You know, so there's such a depth of innovation that's already going on. Combining that with this area being the home to one of Australia's early unicorns in Canva, it'll soon be the home to one of Australia's other great unicorns in Atlassian, who are committing to bring their headquarters to this precinct. And now the role of the New South Wales government is in enabling this as a connected precinct. And I think it's, you know, we've learned so many lessons globally, both from the work of the building in which Chantel and I and Brad work in today, and yourself, Irfan, in the Sydney Startup Hub, and creating this as a prototype, and now looking at how we scale that to be not just a community for startups, but a community for the whole technology ecosystem. Being able to build on the assets that I've spoken about and being able to really drive a connected community, bringing innovators, entrepreneurs and students together in one large community and enabling those connections. And you know, so this project is a long-term project. It's a 15-year project. So while COVID is having a distinct and real effect on where we are today and our short-term outlook, the fundamentals are still don't change. Innovation will set the agenda for the future. That innovation is driven through collaboration, and it's collaboration at a local level, and then more importantly at an international level, that will help us address some of the challenges that we're facing today that are written large through the effects of COVID. I think that's probably a good time for me to hand back to you, Irfan.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it. So we'll stay tuned for more updates on what's being planned there. And of course, looking forward to more collaboration with India as well on the new president, as well as at the Startup Hub as well.
Yes, we're on the hunt for anchor tenants, so you'll hear from us. So
Sure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate you joining on board. Thank you. Now, over to Dr. Ramanan. Obviously, you heading a large mission at a national level with the Atal Innovation Mission under the auspices of Niti Aayog. You've got a big, huge mandate to have innovation kind of address across multiple levels. So maybe you can share a little bit of insights on what's happening during COVID days. I know your team is really engrossed in various teams to deal with the situation. How have you reached out to your ecosystem nationally, and what are the measures? I know there have been some solves and some support being done as well. But looking ahead, as we work towards normalcy, what's the outlook, and how are you seeing your incubators preparing and coming on board?
Thank you, Irfan, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody who is logged on to this call from India as well as from Australia. It is indeed a pleasure and privilege for me to participate in this, and I really want to thank Irfan and the Indo-Australian Chamber for giving me this opportunity. And I hope everyone who is attending this call are also safe and sound and following the practice guidelines by your ministry or by a government or by the organization where you're working. I'm going to answer your question in two parts, Irfan. One is I'm going to talk a little bit on what Atal Innovation Mission is all about, because that would be good to know from all the people who are not in India and who are from abroad. And the second is, what are we doing in the COVID-19 crisis and post-COVID-19? What the implications are from an innovation entrepreneurship perspective. As you shared, I'm the mission director for Atal Innovation Mission. This is a national mission to drive and create an ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship across the length and breadth of the country. It's a flagship initiative of the Government of India, directly being supervised by the Prime Minister. It is housed in the Niti Aayog. The Niti Aayog is the National Institution for Transforming India. It is the think tank for the government. And this is one of those few initiatives of the Niti Aayog where not only is it from a strategic think tank point of view, but also the responsibility for implementing that has fallen under Niti Aayog, under the Atal Innovation Mission. India has, as all of you are aware, we are 1.3 billion people. We have what they call as a demographic dividend. We have more than 65% of our country under 35 years old. We have 1.4 million schools, about 10,500 engineering and related institutions, 39,000 colleges in our country. We have more than 150 million young students entering into the workplace over the next 5 to 10 years. So this is something that is very important for the future of our country, because we have 1.3 billion people who are riding on the hope that these 150 or 200 million students who will be entering into the workplace will carry the nation forward. We have also been the beneficiary of a fast-growing economy over the last several years. Our economy has been growing at a brisk pace of anywhere between 6 to 10%, depending on the year in which it was growing. But of course, the COVID-19 crisis has created a whole lot of disruption, not only in India, but across the world, because of the supply chains, because of lockdowns, and so on and so forth. Indeed, it is unprecedented in terms of historical crisis of this magnitude. And I think all the countries have a great challenge. But in this challenge, innovation, entrepreneurship, startups are going to play a very vital role in being able to address this challenge and the way forward. At the Atal Innovation Mission, we have approached it very holistically in terms of how do we drive and create this ecosystem of innovation. Because as most of you are aware, and many of the Indians who are working abroad, they have found an ecosystem where they are able to realize their full potential. So many Indians are very smart. I mean, it's of course been driven by a very strong emphasis on education and intellectual capability that is there in this country. So how do we ensure that this huge demographic dividend of highly talented, highly capable, creative people also get an ecosystem to exercise that capability and express itself through organizations, through startups, and through innovation? How do we transform India from a nation of job seekers to a nation of job creators? That is a fundamental focus. So for this, first and foremost, at a school level, we have a holistic approach spanning schools, universities, industry, in every state, across all the districts. And India is a large country. We have, as many of you may be aware, we have 733 districts in our country. We have 600,000 villages in our country. So it's a large country, and we have only 8 tier 1 cities, and those are Bombay, Chennai, Delhi, and so on and so forth. So we have had this huge influx of migration from various parts of the country into the tier 1 cities. And that's not a sustainable operation. So the whole focus is how do we create jobs across the country? So we have identified 100 smart cities in our country. We have more than 200 potential new smart cities that can be developed. How do we ensure that all of these becomes hubs of job creation and job innovation? So if you want to do that, we want to make sure that our school students who are coming out from the schools, 1.4 million schools, acquire a problem-solving, innovative mindset. And therefore, we have launched thousands of what are known as Atal Tinkering Labs. And these are dedicated labs where the latest of technologies like 3D printers, robotics, IoT devices, miniaturized electronics, and augmented virtual reality, do-it-yourself kits are introduced for grade 6 to grade 12 students. They are introduced into problem solving. They look at problems in and around the community that they live in, identify with a group of young students who are their teammates, solutions using these technologies. So you are inculcating a problem-solving, innovative mindset in the school beyond the rote learning mindset that is being infused in most of the schools in India and probably even abroad. Most of the schools train the students that you should get good marks, get into a good university, get good marks again, go to a university abroad, and get good marks again and join a particular job, whether it is in IBM, Google, TCS, Wipro, and so on. How do you transform that mindset into we can be a creator, we can be an innovator, right? So that is, so when these students, we have launched close to about 5,000 tinkering labs across the country in more than 660 districts of our country. And this has had a tremendous positive impact. And it's a game changer in terms of the education system. And 2.5 million students today are exposed to tinkering technologies, solving problems. We launched tinkering challenges at the school level, tinkering marathons at a national level. And all of these create the necessary environment, a conducive environment for an excitement in curiosity to become creative and to become innovative. Now, when these students go into colleges, we are setting up world-class incubators. So Atal Innovation Mission has launched over the last 2 years, 102 incubators across the country. And these are diverse in nature. There are agri-tech, healthcare incubators, biotech incubators, smart city incubators, infrastructure incubators, and so on and so forth. The idea is here, every incubator is supported by the government by 20 crores of grant, 20 crores of Indian rupees by 10 crores of Indian rupees by grant, and they can provide matching funds or equivalent additional funds. And these will be used to foster startups. Every incubator would foster 20 to 25 startups every 2 years, and they will help them graduate to be able to stand on their own legs. So why is the incubator required? Because to overcome the various valleys of death that the startups have. And they provide venture capital support, technology, research, lab access support. They provide them mentoring support, business planning, strategy support, and so on. We have today 70 of these 102 incubators fully operational. We have more than 1,500 startups that have come up in the ecosystem in the last 2 years due to these incubators. The idea is with these 100 incubators fully operational, we'll have at least 5,000 startups graduating from the Indian ecosystem. And then it will continue to scale up over the next several years. The third initiative that we have launched is what is known as Atal Community Innovation Centers. And this is to serve the unserved, underserved regions of our country. We have only 8 tier 1 cities, like I said, and the remaining are tier 2, tier 3 cities, villages, districts, and so on. How do you ensure that the benefits of innovation reach across to every aspect of India? And you are able to create many, many job creation innovation centers. And that is where these Atal Community Innovation Centers will help. They also convert what is popularly known as Jugaad innovation, that is workaround innovations, which is very much prevalent in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, and convert them into replicable, scalable, technology-driven, high-quality innovations. So that is another aspect of these community innovation centers. The fourth initiative is we are launching what is known as ARISE, Applied Research and Innovation for Small Enterprises. Now, this is targeted towards the MSME industry, so that the MSME industry, which is 70% of India's industry, is small business. And many of them are formal as well as informal. How do you boost this? And how do you make a self-reliant India? How do you trigger Make in India capability? By supporting innovation in the MSME sector. And the ARISE challenges are modeled along the US SBIR or the UK SBRI programs, where there will be 2 phases. One is from an idea to a prototype, and the other is from a prototype to a product. And then you will have government and industries being a ready buyer for that innovation. Because most the innovation happens, but if it is not challenge driven, then it creates, it is a solution in search of a problem. And we want to turn it around. We have a number of problems in our country. We have 22% of our country below the poverty line. We have 44% of country agri-economy base. We have a number of challenges that the ministries would like to get solved through innovations and through startups. And therefore, the ARISE challenges will provide a mechanism for that. And in order to make all of this work, we have encouraged a very strong private sector partnership and partnership with countries. And that is where the Indo-Australian connection is going to help. Because already with many countries, and we have an agreement signed with Australia and Australian entities, so that we can work and collaborate on startup exchange programs, incubator exchange programs, joint challenges being launched in order to serve not only the needs of Australia, but also the needs of India and the global market. So with this, we have actually created a strong network of partnerships with the private sector, with international companies, and with international governments, so that we can work together and collaborate together to make all of these initiatives successful. Now, I come to the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 crisis has been unprecedented, like I said. And so a team of Atal Innovation Mission drove an initiative where we search for COVID-19 related solutions, which are preventive, assistive, or curative in nature across the country from the startup and from the industry. And we were also looking at any startups which are outside India, which can have solutions which can be applied in India too. And therefore, we launched a search. Atal Innovation Mission coordinated this with the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Biotechnology of India, with Startup India and Invest India, and also with MeitY, with the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. And the solutions were in several categories, both hardware devices, which are needed to address this crisis, as well as software solutions like contact tracing solutions and other solutions. Now, with all of this, we identified more than 1,500 solutions from the startup community. And that was fantastic because the investment in startups that the government has done over the last couple of years has paid a rich dividend in being able to identify ready to deploy implementable, scalable solutions. And we have also organized what is known as a support organization, so that these startups can be supported to deploy their implementations and to be able to scale them up. And they will need manufacturing support, they may need venture capital support, or they may need supply chain management support. They may need regulatory support for getting regulatory access to or some policy support. So these are all the support being facilitated by Atal Innovation Mission along with its partners. And that includes NASSCOM, CII, and FICCI. And FICCI is the International Collaborative Organization. And I'm sure they also have a branch operating in Australia with whom we can collaborate. The Prime Minister of India launched a 20 lakh crore resurrection of economy package just recently. And he identified 5 pillars upon which this economy can be rebuilt. And I just want to share that because I think it is very important in this particular seminar. He said the first pillar is that of demographic dividend. How do we leverage the demographic dividend in order to be able to, and that is a pillar on which this economy can be built. But that means you have to have innovation, entrepreneurship being embraced by this demographic dividend and being facilitated by various policies as well as infrastructural capabilities in our country. The second pillar he talked about was infrastructure. How do we ensure that in a modern world like today, not only do we have the physical infrastructure to enable a supply chain management and access to the remotest parts of the country, but how do you reinforce a digital infrastructure and enable digital transformation so that you're able to reach the nook and corner of our country and you're able to stimulate innovations and you're able to enable reach? The third pillar that he identified was that of demand. India is a large country. It has great demand. Many countries are flocking to India to fulfill the demand. How do you ensure that our Indian organizations also respond to this demand? After all, 1.3 billion people, we have problems of affordable housing, smart cities, clean drinking water and sanitation, waste management, disaster management, and so on. And we need a lot of solutions for all that. We need precision agriculture. We need the ability of e-commerce to be able to sell our products which are created in our hilly districts to the rest of the world. So there is a tremendous opportunity of fulfilling the demand and thereby encouraging the industry. The fourth pillar he talked about was technology. How do you leverage affordable, accessible, available, and advanced technology for the purposes of strengthening the other pillars and being able to drive innovation and entrepreneurship to be able to leveraging technology and making technology an integral part of any innovation that is happening. And finally, he talked about a socio-economic approach where society has to benefit in addition to the economy of the country. Otherwise, you will have the digital divide. And that means encouraging social innovation, which is a necessary prerequisite in order to be able to ensure economic growth and economic success and to be able to address the divide that is caused. So all of these require tremendous collaboration on not only within the country, but between countries. And that is where I see the great opportunity between Indo-Australian collaboration to be able to address that. And with the recent summit that the Prime Minister had with the Australian government, I'm sure we can encourage that. And I want to thank Irfan and everybody else who is involved in these initiatives so that we can collaborate and we can jointly create a much better world than what we are living.
Thank you, Dr. Ramanan, for those comprehensive words and sharing those insights about the mission and obviously the initiatives you're driving and even post-COVID, the outlook as well. I'll be definitely coming back to you quickly again around some of the programs that we are looking ahead and how we can collaborate. On that note, I will switch over to
Irfan, I just have to share that at 11:45, I'll have to leave. Because I have to go somewhere for a 12:30 meeting. So. Okay, I think we might definitely try and wrap up maybe 10 past 4, which is about 11:40 India time anyway. We'll try our best. Chantel, we'll switch over to you quickly. We will not worry about COVID at this stage. We know that part. How do you look at curating programs, initiatives? I know that we've had some success stories from the studio. How can we collaborate with India, and how do you see the need for global collaboration important to accelerate?
Okay. Look, it's a challenging time for all the incubators. I think in the Sydney Startup Hub, I just have to sort of frame it in that way. I have to just give a bit of experience. So we've been running for about 2 years now. We've incubated about 80 startups. Pre-COVID in January, we were pretty well full. We were sitting at about 150 people, around 45 startups. Collectively, over 2 years, the startups have raised 41 million Australian dollars, which is extraordinary. So some have raised nothing, others have raised larger amounts. Now, post-COVID, what we've seen is I did a big survey of what was going on within our community of residents. We'll only have a portion of residents returning because it's a very challenging environment. But what we've really seen is we've seen two extremes. Those that were, and that depended on where they were on their funding journey, on their, in terms of their journey in terms of their technology and really how much of a pure tech startup they were, and what their offering was. So some of the more sophisticated startups who had with the feedback there. Some of the more sophisticated startups have got some serious runway already in place. So we're looking at a couple. They're ready for a couple of years runway. So they're ready. They're fine. They're good. There's not a lot of middle ground, and then you've got others that are still sort of really sort of just trying to sort of stay alive and keep moving forward. But what I think is exciting is that we actually have had, we're going to be opening soon again. We shut access because of COVID. But what I think is exciting is that we've seen some people that have been thinking about starting a startup, and during the time of COVID, they've actually used that to sort of test run different experiments basically, and so I think that that's another thing that doesn't really get spoken about, that this is also a time of opportunity for new businesses, and so I think we'll see more of those emerging, which is really fantastic. And we definitely need to see that, because I think what everyone in the hub is really worried about is what is the pipeline, how has COVID impacted the pipeline of startups, because they come into our spaces and then they'll move through. So in terms of the studio, what we do, we really are focused on what we call media technologies. We're really interested in that relationship between, say, the screen industry and the tech sector, but also across the creative industries. But we're talking about tech startups. So we're not talking about filmmakers, but we may have startups, for example, that work in sound, but they may be doing sound for something akin to a Google Maps. Or it could be sound, particularly back into this sector, into the sound industry, the audio industry, the screen industry. So we think there's a lot of opportunity for Australia anyway. We've got 20, the studio actually has 20 local and global foundation partners and sponsors that sit across academia, industry, business and technology. And we are all about wrapping the incubator with all these different ways that the startups can connect into all those different segments of business, really, because as they go on their journey, they may need different things at different times. So we're very interested in as many international opportunities as possible. Some of our big foundation partners are Cisco, Dolby, Animal Logic, who you may or may not know, and then University of New South Wales and other academic institutions as well.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Chantel. And I really look forward to really showcasing some of those scale-ups from studio to collaborate with India. We've had already some success stories of startups being incubated there. And we also look forward to hosting some of India. I mean, India's got a major creative, and film industry and entertainment sports industry as well. So definitely a lot of collaboration there, especially with the 5G rollout. So I see a lot of opportunity to collaborate, and yeah, definitely keen to share some of those programs as well with you, and yeah, execute some of those exchange programs. Ravi, on that note, thanks Chantel again. Ravi, on that note, let me invite you, and probably I will just quickly touch on two things. How is it going with the new facility, which is one of the largest in the world? We're looking forward to the launch. Hopefully we'll get back on track. And second, one of your favorite area, which is funding and investment. So please do reflect on what is the new strategy of funding and fundraise for startup ecosystem that you want to kind of touch on.
Yeah, thank you, Irfan. Thank you for inviting me. I had the pleasure and honor of visiting Australia earlier this year. I met some of you already, Chantel. I visited your facility. So I think it's a very exciting time for us from the standpoint of the opportunities that are opening up for the startups. I know Dr. Ramanan and Mr. Vadba already laid out, the larger picture. So I will go at 100 feet and kind of talk about some specific initiatives that we could potentially look at more closely. So first of all, in terms of the startup ecosystem, I think we are no different from any of the other places. We have had our share of startups that have lost their markets, lost their customers, and they will continue to struggle. But there are a few, I would say about a third of them will probably have a very hard time getting back out of the pandemic. 20% of them, on the other hand, will actually do fantastically well because of the fact that suddenly it is like a God-sent opportunity that was given to them. Here it is, you just grow 10 times, 20 times in a short period of time, which is not something that's usually thinkable even by startups. And then there are a few others who are deciding which way to go. They are still going through the process of, figuring out how to pivot, what are the new markets, what are the new business models, which are the new, technologies that they should switch to if necessary, and so on and so forth. So from all that perspective, I think we're beginning to see that it is changing everywhere, just like anywhere else. But also at the same time, I think we are getting to be much more global than ever before because of this digital thing, like what Irfan you pulled off. Here is a bunch of very, very learned people on both sides of the ocean talking about our ecosystems and potentially working together. While we were, talking about this very much in a conceptual way, I think it's becoming a reality in the way we are going to roll this thing off very quickly, because more and more startups are moving to the digital, realm of capabilities. But at the same time, we are also looking at not necessarily restricting ourselves to the markets that we start out in. We can actually do it in other places too. So from a standpoint of creating the, the innovation ecosystem that we are looking to do here in Telangana, we see a similar opportunity to work very closely with New South Wales, on the entire innovation ecosystem there, because I think there is so much that we can do together. I think what you will find in terms of the sectors that we have kind of focused on because of the pandemic is healthcare, is financial services, is education and logistics. And of course, there are a few others too. But I'm saying if these are the areas in which we can actually put our heads together, I think there is so much to be done. In fact, when I was visiting the Sydney hub, I went to this Future Transport Digital Accelerator, I guess, at the top floor. It's fantastic, the kind of clarity that not only does the government have about what is it that they want to get out of innovative startups, and really create a pull for them to serve this opportunity. And that opportunity could be served from anywhere, and if they're really open to it. And that's the kind of progressiveness of creating demand in an ecosystem. Is we all talk about doing great work with startups. That's great. You can mentor them to an extent. You can introduce them to some investors. You can even introduce them to some mentors. But beyond that, if you don't get them business, they're not going to go very far. So this demand generation, the demand stimulation, is extremely an important part of any of our work that we do here collectively. And therefore, I would like to think that we have those kinds of digital startups here in India that can actually serve opportunities in Australia and vice versa. Because as Dr. Ramanan said, India is a very large economy. We are $3 trillion and looking to grow hopefully even more as we go along, with a little bit of a hiccup at this point. But there's definitely, and I can guarantee the Australian startups that if you can solve you can get your startups to solve the problem in India, you can solve it anywhere in the world. And similarly, we have hardened startups coming out of India who have solved it in India, and now they can solve it in Australia as well. And for us, Australia is a stepping stone for the larger global market, because in several ways, it is the place where, the kind of environment, the kind of customer sophistication, maturity is already reflective of what's available in the rest of the world. So how about leveraging all that, but in a very very friendly environment, if you will. People are very forthcoming, embracing of innovation. So why not work from there, and then that's your launch pad to the world market. So that's the way I think we can do that. So Irfan, I know this was a very long prelude, but to tell you about the space that we are moving into, the spaceship that we are going to move into, is just getting ready to be launched sometime in October. We are looking to have a good mix of startups. Of course, that will be the bulk of the people that will be there. But at the same time, we're also looking for several innovation teams of large corporations, because they are also now beginning to understand that they have to be much more entrepreneurial, much more on the go. And therefore, they're trying to get a lot of their teams to start working, from spaces like ours. They are maybe startups unto themselves, except that they receive a salary from a large company. But the thought process, the way they work, the way they interact with other innovators, it's going to be something that we facilitate in our place. And also at the same time, we're hoping that InQ and New South Wales and others will actually have a kind of a place there, so that we can create these bridge and keep it active rather than it being a very anecdotal thing that we do every so often. So lots of these foreign desks are going to be in that place. And then finally, we're looking at doing several capacity building initiatives to help other folks also build out their innovation ecosystem across the world. So that's the kind of work that we are doing. So I'm hoping by October, but definitely by the late end of this year, we're looking to move there. Coming to your startup, funding, so yeah, I think both the startups and the investors are in a little bit of a dilemma as to what would be the right thing to go seek funding for from a startup standpoint, and what are the right investment theses for them to go into. Despite that, there are a few VCs that continue to invest in India, which is very good, and several of them have done this through Zoom calls, and so it's phenomenal the way this continues to grow. But we're also seeing a lot more on the angel side. Angels, have their own money; they don't need to, seek institutional approvals and so on and so forth. So they can move very fast, and maybe the startups are much, much cheaper now to buy into. So they are also moving in that area. So we are seeing. I wouldn't say the same level that we were in, say, February, but definitely not doing too shabbily given this, the uncertainty that surrounds us.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just thought I would give you some idea of what's going on here and what are the possibilities of working with Australia.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ravi. On that note, Brad, you're there still. We'll probably wrap up in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Brad, thank you for holding on. Obviously, it's a tough time here, but I think I'm looking forward to the times ahead. So what's your quick reflection and, the outlook forward? And of course, there's some good programs that's kicked off from here, which are even scaling into India. But as one of our global partner, what is the outlook looking ahead with India as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, Malik, and thank you for having me. I mean, just to set the scene as to who we are, Tankstream Labs, we are a co-working technology community for more scale-up businesses than actually startup and early-stage startups. So we've actually seen over this whole COVID time a whole variety of issues with our members, impacting them from funding, cash flow, to customers, to growth, talent. There's been so many issues as a result of this whole COVID-19. But what's been great to see is that there's been a lot of resilience have really had to react, which is new to business, just to almost survive rather than thrive. Obviously, there have been businesses which have thrived as a result of this due to the industries and the sectors they operate in. But I see going forward, I would agree with a lot of the comments that Chantel said earlier. You know, that pipeline is going to be an issue. That's going to be a significant problem, I believe, coming out of this, because you're not going to have that pipeline of early stage businesses coming through. You know, there's going to be a lot of, although it's perfect time for people to think about starting a business, especially with the unemployment rates and people who have lost their jobs and been retrenched, and, you know, people actually reflecting as a result of COVID and thinking, is this really the right thing I want to be doing now, given such significant changes to lifestyles? But I do believe that it's going to be slow for businesses to start. One, because of, you know, the funding available, but also just uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty coming out of this. For people from a personal perspective as well. So that is really is going to be an issue, which is why I links quite nicely into collaboration with international partners like yourself, Malik, at InQ, because, you know, that's really where I think there's going to be opportunity. It's not just about, you know, Australian businesses you know, working in Australia, and it's not just about Indian businesses working in India. It's about collaboration. It's about, you know, how can Australian businesses get accesses to new markets or markets that they potentially didn't think of pre-COVID, and customers, and likewise for Indian customer businesses, that, you know, where is there opportunities for them to grow their businesses and get access to new customers. So I feel that you know, in the international community, and obviously restrictions will take place in terms of travel and whenever that will be. But I think it's more important than ever for the international community to collaborate, and for businesses to think about expanding into global locations than just thinking domestically, which maybe the mindset is thinking at the moment, given, you know, people are isolated to their own geographical location right now.
Thanks, Brad, and look forward to initiating some of the India market access program and actively driving and potentially like a soft landing program as well. Thank you, Brad, for that.
I was going to say, we're a big supporter of everything you do at InQ, Malik, and
thank you.
You know, we've had a number of our companies which have been across to India, and we see that trend continue, and also Indian companies come over here.
Yeah, we've got a swag of programs, and in fact, we'll be working closely with Dr. Ramanan, Ravi, and team as well. On that note, Dr. Ramanan, last few words before you need to wrap up on Australia-India innovation collaboration.
Thanks, Irfan. I personally think, and you know, when you had visited and InQ has set up a statement of intent, this is the way forward. You know, there is, as also Ravi mentioned, there is a lot of opportunity for Indian startups to collaborate with Australian organizations and vice versa. Because many of the challenges that you have solved or you are trying to solve, whether it is in renewable energies, whether it is in smart cities and smart infrastructure, or the digital highways that you are creating, or whether it is in mining, or whether it is in agriculture, precision agriculture, these are all common. Water management, for example, these are all common problems that we have between India and Australia. And so there is a tremendous opportunity and Australia is also in you know, it's not like in Europe, or it's not like connected to the US so closely physically. And yet you are able to reach across to the rest of the world because you are leveraging the internet and all of that stuff. So that is the area, those are some of the areas where India and Australia can collaborate, our startups can collaborate. Secondly, I think it is very important that you mix the skill and scale. You know, you have, Australia is an advanced economy, so you have talented, innovative startups and skilled people, but you have the scale requirements in India. So how do you match skill to scale, right? And that is where partnerships will become very crucial and necessary in order for us to drive this. And thirdly, I think there is tremendous positive synergies and intent between the governments. And, you know, very few governments have such sort of you know, close collaboration and synergy in thinking. So if we don't leverage that to the advantage of driving innovation and entrepreneurship together and addressing not only problems that each of the countries have, but also problems that all the other countries surrounding us have, right? that becomes a great opportunity for us to strengthen collaboration and to be able to strengthen the solutions that are needed for the rest of the world. So I also believe that this post-COVID-19 throws open, as Ravi said, a whole range of new opportunities for startups to pivot from what they were doing to what is now needed in the post-COVID world, to address many problems that we were never thinking about. I mean, climate change is one of those issues everybody has been talking about, but this crisis has shown that if a virus can create such havoc, imagine a climate change impact that we have been expecting and a disaster out of that we have been expecting and which people have been predicting. If that happens a reality, then it will be even worse. So how do we prevent that, and how do we have collaboration on all of that is going to play a crucial role in the future of this, of not only of the countries, but of the planet in general. So with that, I'm sure there is tremendous opportunity, there is tremendous goodwill. So let's capitalize on that and make it happen.
Thank you, Dr. Raman. Appreciate your time. Thanks. Over to you, Anil Wadhwa ji. Final few words. I know there's a lot in the defense space tech as well. You probably touched on and bit on the cyber security as well. So any last few words on the India-Australia collaboration on the innovation sector?
So very quickly, I think just take off from what Mr. Ramanan has said, in his last comments. Essentially, what we see is that education technology and cybersecurity and financial services, they're all seeing an upsurge. At least in the Indian context, these are also the areas that have been identified in the report. And you already mentioned the areas of space and defense. So I can't go into all the details right now, but I think there is a increasing demand, which is common to both the countries there. And in fact, what is happening is that in India, if you see now, in the government itself is offering startups $130,000 to develop an encrypted video conferencing solution, for example, which can work on multiple platforms, because obviously there's a need to come up with indigenous solutions. So there is a trend towards solutions and technologies which are defying the earlier prediction of that growth will not happen in the COVID period. And I think these niche areas that have been identified also by Mr. Narayan, for example, it's very clear that some of these trends should be capitalized on. Many of them are common to India and Australia, and I think it is here that we should work together.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anil Wadhwa ji. Chantel, any final few words from your perspective in terms of the future and collaboration?
Well, I think, it's really critical, as we've all talked about, to collaborate. And that's, it's really only through collaboration that you really have innovation, I believe. And so I'm really excited to see how we can all continue to work together.
Yeah, I'm keen to showcase some of those startups from Studio, where they can have access to a large market like India and, even the entertainment sports industry. I think we will probably even target some sectors there, and there's huge opportunities to collaborate both ways. So look forward to that. Yeah,
look, I think the studio is really excited about this sort of intersection between the tech and the stream sector, especially as, their interdependence continues to deepen, as, convergence between digital media and work and life continues, and also really as we look towards what the next generation of the internet is going to be. And the next generation of the internet is probably going to derive more from the games industry. And so that's really the nexus as well that we're very interested in at the studio. And so, we have deep connections into, say, Hollywood. We'd love to have deep connections into Bollywood. But into the
you said it there. I think it's one of the biggest.
Yeah, into the tech sector of that. So if you think about the screen industry, not the actors, not the glamorous bit, but you think about all the technology, the technological innovation that happens within the screen industry. What we believe at the studio, and which we see time and time again, is that opportunity, that innovation that might happen in the screen industry is applicable across the many sectors, many industries. So we're actually industry agnostic. So I think there's a huge opportunity there, because I think when you look into that area, it's sort of we frame it in such a way that you can really capture people's imagination and curiosity.
Great. Thank you, Chantel. Brad, any final few words?
I think Brad's departed.
Okay. All right, Ravi, I think we'll probably wrap up on that note. Ravi, I know we're also working on a series here to connect the founders, influencers, and mentors, EIR, and also the investors. Post your trip and my trip to Hyderabad as well, there's a series of program being kicked off. I'm really pleased that we're working hand in hand with T-Hub. So both InQ and T-Hub team, I'm really thankful for your support from your team as well to establish these series, and also an ongoing conversation, but also outcome as well. There are funds being set up and various programs being set up on both sides. So we'll probably look forward to facilitate and leverage. Any final thoughts on the programs ahead before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think the goodness about the programs that we are putting together is that these are very curated kind of connections that we are making between these two countries, because we are very familiar with the speed dating part, which is what a lot of Western cultures have adopted. India has done arranged marriages, so we have something in between where we actually can find the right partners in India and vice versa to really make these things work, because we don't need any more of the speed dating anymore. The opportunity is right there in front of us, facing us. But who amongst the the people in the customer organization is the right one? Who do we talk to? How do we really build the business in this new geography? Is something that people struggle with. And I think that's what the essence of our partnership is, because we know these two geographies well. We know the markets, we have relationships which we can introduce to these startups so that they can really hit the ground running in these markets, really take it to the next level. So I think that's the essence of our partnership that we would like to bring to our partners, both startups and corporates in both these countries.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. And I think those three things that you touched on, the market validation, the client or customer validation, and the investor validation, we want to facilitate. And there's also what I've seen a trend here is, the startups also require business development and connecting with opportunities as well, where there is revenue growth opportunities. And that's where, these stronger ecosystem level collaboration really plays a strong, role. And I think, we're looking forward to facilitating that across both the ecosystems. So thank you. On that note, I will thank all the panelists for your time and sharing your insights. We will obviously share this video and across the rest of the ecosystem. I know in India it's earlier in the day, but yeah, definitely this will be shared, and we'll also seek more feedback and comment. And as we kick off the rest of the webinar series, we'll communicate with all the ecosystem and look forward to all your support. So on that note, I thank again, and thank you to all the participants and attendees as well. And I wrap this session on that note. Thank you again. Appreciate that. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.